10 parks today, and time-wise, to fit everything into an hour, I talk a lot, and if I can keep going, we'll get through the 10. I assume some of you have been to these parks. You're going to relive experiences. Oh yeah, we saw that when we were there and stuff. If you can hold questions to the end, or if it's pertinent to something I'm talking about, feel free. We're very informal here, but if I go down too many side roads, we're going to run over by quite a bit, because there's all kinds of stories. You could pick any one of the parks and I'll talk for the next hour on that one park. So there's endless what I did when I was here kind of stories. We'll minimize them. So if you can, I'd love to hear comments of your trips and where you'd like to go and stuff. But if we could hold those to the end, that'll allow us to get through everything today. Right. Just a quick introduction to myself. Some of you were not here last month. My name's Steve Farrar. I do not work for the Park Service. Can you, Nancy, if you can kill the lights, that would be great. It's a hobby. I got started, I grew up in Medfield, and there's not a lot of, there are no national parks in Massachusetts. But at the tender age of 14, I was selected to represent the New England troop at the National Boy Scout Jamboree, which in 1969 was out in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. So they flew us out to Salt Lake City, and we had a 5-day road trip up through the Tetons and Yellowstone and Glacier National Parks on our way to Idaho. And I had my eyes open to the White Mountains in New Hampshire wasn't quite all there was to see in the world. In my opinion, if your first exposure to watching Old Faithful go up is a jaw-dropping wow, and then you move on to the Grand Teton and your jaw drops again, and then you go up to the glacier, and if you have the same reaction in each of the parks, quite logically, why wouldn't you want to go see more of them? So that's why I have my 59 park shirt on, an informal Wednesday here. The collage, if you want to take a look at it, is there are 59 total U.S. national parks. So far, I've visited and explored 54 of the 59. So I got a few more left to visit, but that's what initiated my quest to go explore them and see what's out there at the time. Great Basin. Great Basin is between the Wasatch Mountains in Utah and the Sierra Nevadas. And then you have the Columbia Plateau up above and the Colorado Plateau below. In the middle is a bowl, a basin, that, this isn't a few acres, this is 209,000 square miles. So it is the big empty. If you're driving across from Utah, there's a lot of nothingness. You want your book on CD to keep you company. But the outstanding feature of this is that all the rain that falls in this area, there's no outlet. All streams and rivers in this area, they don't go to the Pacific, they don't go down to the Gulf of Mexico, they just sink. So hydrologically, that's why it is how it's named, it's a basin. We're going to go backwards here. Wheeler Peak is a 13,000 foot mountain that is now within the confines of the park. A lot of the national parks start their journey as national monuments. They get designated, and then through the efforts of expansion of the boundaries and stuff, they get upgraded to national park status. Great Basin actually used to be Lehman Caves National Monument, and then it was expanded. Prometheus in 1964 was the oldest living thing on Earth, and a climate scientist wanted to find out exactly how old it was, so bored a series of holes in it to count the rings and killed the tree in its exuberance. So to keep that happening again. The groves of bristlecone pine that don't grow anywhere else in the world. There's a species of Great Basin bristlecone pines that are 5,000 years old. That's the only place they grow is in this high country. The boundaries of the park were expanded to preserve and keep this from happening again and give a level of conservation protection to the bristlecones. So that's when it got, I think 2003 it got upgraded to national park. That's worth a trip just to see these things because number one, you won't find them anywhere else and they're very accessible. You can drive, right, there's a campground at 9,000 feet. So if you acclimatize on the way, it's not too bad. But then you can hike on up another 1,000 feet up to the 10,000 foot level where these groves are. And they look like they're dead. There's not a lot to them, but they grow in a very arid area. Very dry soil. There's very little rain. It's freezing cold up there. It's at elevation, and the winters are long, so it's a very short growing season. So they don't grow. They don't attain the height of their kin, the redwoods or the sequoias or anything. They're very stumpy looking, but they're just fantastic. To sit and in the middle of them is quite an eerie experience, actually. The caves are still there. This is one of the national parks that has ranger-led tours in a cave. Limestone, so you have the formations. It's not anything that's going to make you forget Carlsbad Caverns in a hurry, but it's a limestone cave. Wheeler Peak is the hike if you want to do that. It's not particularly a technical hike, it's just a walk in the woods, but you go up the ridge up to the summit, and a few things you want to pay attention to the guidebook. There are some dangers up there. Number one of which is altitude sickness. You go from the campground where you start at the trailhead at 9,000 feet, and within a few miles you climb to 13,000. So you're going up in a hurry. The ridge line, you're above tree level, so you're spectacularly exposed, and you are the highest point. So if, in fact, a storm comes in, which they do pretty much every afternoon, you don't want to be the lightning rod. And it's very dry, and there's rattlesnakes up there. So you go with your eyes open. You have to be self-reliant because there's no rangers up at the top or anything. You're on your own. But it's a nice hike. So you come up the ridge line, and this is looking back at the trail. You get a good vista of the pines. Do this again. If you stay at night, this is out in the middle of nowhere. There are no towns anywhere near here. So in terms of man-made lighting, washing out your star viewing, there's nothing. So you've never seen so many stars in your life as sitting up here because that's not light, that's not clouds, that's the Milky Way. So to sit with these ancient bristlecones, it's a unique experience. I don't know why this does this. Zion. So now we left Nevada and we're down to Utah. There are 5 parks throughout Utah. This is the map of Zion. The parks out west are half of them. You're driving around the top and you're looking down, like the Grand Canyon. You're on the South Rim and you're looking down at the wonderful vista. Zion is one of the ones where the road is at the bottom and you're looking up at the rock formations. So you used to be able to drive in there. Now because the fumes have nowhere to go, they get trapped in the canyons. They don't allow personal vehicles anymore. There's an electric trolley system, so you can go up into the canyon, but you have to stop at the visitor Virgin River carved the Zion Canyon, and when you see it, you think, this did all that work? There's not a lot there. It's depending on what time of the year you go, of course. If you go in the spring when it's all rainwater coming from the higher plateaus down, it can be pretty violent. But the actual droppage, the high plateau is up around 9,000 feet and drops all the way to 4,000. So in the length of the river, it's actually dropping over 80 feet per mile, which is 10 times what the Colorado River drops in the Grand Canyon. So on a relative scale, the river drops. Quick slide about as the river washed down, the loose sedentary created a landslide, and what it did is backed up the river, so the silt has accumulated on either side of the river. This is a formation of Angel's Landing. The debris here is huge. It's 90 times the volume of the concrete used to build the Hoover Dam. What it does is give you a little latitude on either side of the river. That in the Grand Canyon, the river's still carving the stone, so there's nothing on the sides. You can raft through it, but there's not landing spots in too many places. In this, there is an accumulation of the silt that's come down. The Virgin River's there, but before the formations, you do have some land that you can walk alongside. So the road parallels the river, and this is the views that you get. The sandstone, it's relative to granite, the sandstone's a soft stone, and the river doesn't have too much trouble eroding it. But the peaks that are left are just fantastic. This is a trail that's not very accessible. I've only been to Zion in the springtime, and it's not an option because the walls are so close that when the water volume is higher, it rises like a thermometer, and that's how these are so smooth, is from the water washing 100, 200 feet up. the water just goes. So you need a permit to go on this trail because the rangers will look and see what's going on, not in your immediate area, but the weather up on the plateau is what you have to watch, because if it rains up there, well, in 1954, there was several groups that were drowned in here because they didn't have the permitting required at the time. So it was clear, it was blue sky, so they went ahead into the narrows, but you're trapped. I mean, you're in there. Within 15 minutes, the level of the water rose over 50 times the volume, and it's like a giant, it looks like a special effects from a movie, that the giant wave just comes rushing down, and if you happen to be in the water at the time, you don't stand much of a chance. So this is a very memorable hike. It's wet, you need your booties, but if you do it, this is your reward. You get up into these very secluded, quiet places, and it's postcard material, so a lot of photo ops. They now offer tubing rides down, and in the middle of the summer when there's less water volume, you have options like that. So instead of taking the mules down to the bottom of the Grand Canyon, you can take the tubes down through the river instead of walking on it yourself. The iconic Zion Lodge, the old black and white, built it right into the side of the place. A great place to stay right in the park. Looks today the same way it did 50 years ago. There's the buses that you can stop at, and they'll drop you off. I was there early in 85. The one hike that I wanted to do that day is called Angel's Landing, and it's a spectacularly exposed peak, but I'll show you Walter's Wiggles in a minute. The Army Corps of Engineer concrete to pave these switchbacks at the time. So it was closed, and I had to pick another trail. So this is the Virgin River, this is the road, and then the trail switchbacks back and forth on the backside up to the east rim of the park. The Virgin River runs north to south, so Zion has an east side and a west side. Both of them have great formations, but I was by myself on this, so this was pre-selfie stick era. So if I wanted a picture, I had to balance my camera on a rock and set the timer and run around to get in the picture and stuff. It was a little more difficult back in the 80s. So I don't have a lot of pictures, but this is up on top of the canyon. That's about a 2,500 foot drop behind me there. That's what I'm looking at. I'm up on the top on the left, and that's Angel's Landing on the right. But that's your reward for climbing up there, as you get the spectacular views from the summit. We went back later. I had 3 boys. I took 2 of them on their spring break, and this was day 1 of our Canyonlands hike. We decided to go to Angel's Landing, and the hike up this spine here to the top, it's the same exact drop on the other side. So it's not real narrow. It's not like you're walking on a railroad rail. It's about a sidewalk wide. But oops is not a good word up there. Since 2004, 6 people have died just falling off the edge. So you got to watch your foot placements. It goes up quite a bit. This is the place that they were pouring the cement. This is called Walter's Wiggles. It's the only way to get up the sheer face of the canyon is to go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. So this is a rather memorable trudge up there. Walter was the first, he pioneered the trail up here. He found a way to get up there, so they named it after him. There's 21 switchbacks that, if you're at the top looking down, these people are on their way up. They have to go back and forth and back and forth, and it just goes, you're going straight up the side of the canyon, actually. They do have a few handrails to steady yourself, but on the exposed side, there's not much. So, like I said, you got to be pretty sure of your foot placements if you're going to go up there. There is a place called Scouts Landing down here where you can stop if you want, or you can continue on up. If you do so, it's not for the faint of heart. That's your exposure. That's how wide it is, and it's maybe a mile long to get up to the top. But that's your reward. If you get up there, you can sit up top and look straight down the face of it. That's the view from the top of Angel's Landing, looking south down the canyon. So it's a unique hike, one to remember. They have the bumper stickers for your cars that says "I climbed Angel's Landing." I mean, it's a notch in your belt if you get up there. So that's Zion. Bryce Canyon. Zion's down here. Bryce, Capitol Reef, Arches, Canyonlands. There's a set of 5 of them through the southern part of Utah. Bryce Canyon the road is on the top of, it's not really a canyon actually, named after Mormon settlers. It goes from north to south. The road is at the top and you're looking down at the formations, and it's an 18-mile long drive that dead ends and you have to turn around and go back up to the visitor center. You're climbing the north, on Zion, the plateau's 9,000 feet at the north and the river flows down to 4,000. This is the other way. The north is 6,000 feet and you're going up, 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 up to 9,000 down at the end. So it's continually climbing. That inspiration point, and it's not really a canyon. It's the whole side of the hill has been eroded, but this is the view from Inspiration Point. Something that Walt Disney might have come up with if he had some good drugs, maybe. It does not look real. It's so surreal. Water has done this. This is, again, that soft sandstone. There's a hard layer on top that keeps a capstone, but then the sides of it get eroded. And absolutely fantastic to hike down the Navajo Loop. You can get down there, and it's not an area that's a formation called Thor's Hammer. When you go down and down and down, I tried to prepare my kids for when we were going out there, and there's just nothing, if they've only been in New England, if you live here, there's nothing around here that you can point to and say, well, it's like that or something. It isn't. It's so different. The texture of the sandstone is we don't have that in New England. So it was fun to hike down and just let them get their hands on it and climb around on the formations, and that's how you learn. So you get down to the bottom, and it's a very different perspective. Now you're at the bottom of these big hoodoo formations, and there's bridges and all kinds of fun stuff. Gives you a little different perspective. Age-wise, Galen, my youngest, was in the 8th grade, and these guys are in the 10th grade, so it's a good time age-wise. They're on their own. They can scamper around. They're not in a snuggly where you have to carry them or something, but they're still willing to, they haven't got their other ideas where they'll go off on their own. They still relatively mind what I tell them to do. 1,000 foot thick sediment. It used to be a big lake, and it just kept piling up with mud and stuff, so it's a soft sedimentary goo that solidified over the years, but now it's exposed, and it gets eroded easily, but that's why it's so big. It's 1,000 feet of it to walk down through. So they've carved to make it passable, some of them, but pretty much it's untouched. As you drive up towards Sunset Point, they're all different views. As you're looking back, the visitor center's down over here, and the road travels along the top. So different lighting highlights different colors from the minerals and stuff. So it's very difficult to get the same picture because the lighting's different, and it hits it, or you're at a different vantage point and stuff. But it's hard to take a bad picture. There's a lot of photo ops there. Rainbow Point is up at the high end. This is the 9,100 foot. And you're looking back along the whole ridge that you drove that 18 miles. Capitol Reef. Capitol Reef. Anybody been to Capitol Reef? It's one of the lesser visited parks in the system. Those are the 5 parks. We were at Zion first, went up to Bryce Canyon. They're all about a day's drive apart. So within a 5-day stretch, you can spend a day at each of the parks and get a pretty good sampler. But you're going to want to stay in some of them for more than a day. Capitol Reef's the one in the middle. Very similar to Bryce in that it's very narrow and very long. This one's over 100 miles long. If you're a Mormon and you're looking at a formation like this, it reminds you of the U.S. Capitol building. So they call it Capitol Reef. A reef, by definition, is actually a barrier. These poor guys were coming west with their covered wagons, and they ran into Water Pocket Full, which is easier to see from the air. The land basically folded up, and for 100 miles, it's an absolute barrier. It's right in the middle of Utah, splits it like a wall. This Route 24 was not open, cut through until the 60s. So previous to that, if you're coming from the east, you run it against this, there's really nothing you can do but you go north or go south to get around it. Other than the Grand Canyon, which includes the entire eroded canyon, this is the only Southwestern park that includes an entire geological feature. That's why it's 100 miles long. It includes the entire water pocket fold. And the water pocket is the name for these. It's a series of eroded on the surface that collects water, so they're all over the place. That's the that's why a lot of people don't go here. It's out in the middle of nowhere. It's on the way to nothing. You kind of want to go see the place to get it. You're not going to stumble on it. The same warning holds that we saw in Zion in the Narrows. If a storm's threatening, you don't want to be there. This is driving my white van Moby. Same kind of very, very high walls and very narrow. So the trail actually, to get up to Cassidy Arch is called the Narrows, and that's what it's like. You can almost touch the walls, and they just go straight up for hundreds of feet. So same thing, if the rain comes, you don't want to be in there. It's called the Grand Wash for a reason. This is Cassidy's Arch. Butch Cassidy actually has his hideout up in this area, and it's pretty spectacular. I don't know if I have the view. Yeah, this is the view from up there. You can see from 50 miles in every direction, and so nobody's going to creep up on you. You're going to see them coming from a long way, and the only way to get to here, up to where they were, is through that Narrows. So one guy with a rifle could hold off the cavalry. It was a great hideout. So these little circles are hollowed out. When the water does come up and swirl around, it carves all kinds of stuff. So you can have fun climbing around some of the formations out in the valley. It looks like something that the Egyptians might have come up with, but this is all just from natural water erosion. Sunset Point, named for a reason. That's when you want to be up there. Now we get to Moab. Moab, over on the eastern border of Utah, is home to both Arches and Canyonlands. Arches, Moab's the town right in the middle there. Again, there's Zion, Bryce Canyon, Capitol Reef, Arches, and Canyonlands. Those are the five. Arches, you drive up through, and there's a series. It's all open land. You can go anywhere you want. Delicate Arch is the symbol of the park. That there's no road to it. You have to hike out to it, but it is the highest concentration of natural arches anywhere on Earth. There are over 2,000 within the park's not particularly huge, it's 114 square miles. There's over 2,000 natural arches found within them. And how they're formed, this is an aerial view. There's the road through the park, and these fins, what happens is the park sits right on top of a 3,000 foot deep. It used to be a great inland sea, and the salts accumulated over time. So there's a 3,000 foot deep bed of gypsum salts underneath the sedentary layer over it. And under pressure, salt pushes up. So it forms domes and cracks. And once the cracks form, then water gets in and starts eroding, and erodes and erodes and gets down, and then you have these freestanding fins, and they stand alone until the weaker parts start dropping away, and that's what ends up giving you the arches, is that you have these series of fins actually, but then when the lower parts drop away, you get the connected top is still intact, so you have an arch. That's how they were formed. So the fiery furnace section are more fins in Devil's Gardens. Those are incipient, yet to be fully formed arches. And some of them are huge. The fins where the bottom has yet to drop out are just standing. And it's not just little poke your head through holes. This is 300 feet across, where the debris from the middle has all dropped away and left the span at the top. Skyline arch. There's no, I'm not going to show you 2,000 pictures of arches, but you get the picture. And they're very accessible. This is a drive up. They have steps that go right up to Skyline Arch. Relative size, you can see a person there to show how big the thing is. This is a favorite picture of mine. I turned the kids loose, and the little one turns to me and said, "Dad, can I go up there?" And I said, "Well, are you asking if I believe you possess the ability to climb that, or are you asking for permission?" I said, "It's a national park. You can go anywhere you want. There's no restrictions." So off they went. There's my two boys. And this is Double Arch. The little one ended up way up here. He's about 100 and... Mom was uninvited from this trip. we showed her the pictures after the fact because she would not have done well watching her little one. Yeah, there's me down below, and so you can drive. The tour buses come to see Double Arch. You can hike out in the sand, and I'm sitting down below, and the kids are up above. He ended up. This is the overhanging part up here. He couldn't go any further because it was overhanging, but he's about 120 feet off the deck, and not roped in. He's in the 8th grade, so he just scrambled up there, and yeah, that's now his wallpaper on his computer. He's very proud of that. And he got down okay. There was nothing to report that got Mom upset.
How did you get down?
Well, kind of the reverse of the way he got up, but you manage. Yeah. It's a great confidence builder to turn them loose if you have faith in their ability to maybe stop when they get to a point that shouldn't be passed. Double O is an arch down below, and then one up above it and stuff. There's very cool formations. You can hike for hours and days out here and not see everything. But primitive is an understatement. You're in the desert. You're out by yourself. So again, I go in the spring. You get very different flavor of the desert if you go the 3rd week in April in particular. Every living thing in the desert blooms in April. And if you grew up in New England and in your 4th grade geography were taught how dry and foreboding a place the desert is, your conception of it will change forever if you go in April, because it's just right out of the rocks, these bright red Indian paintbrushes, and there's just bursts of color everywhere. And I'm like, well, this isn't a desert. But if you go in June or in August, you better carry a lot of water because you're very, very hot and dry, and there are no services. You're on your own. This is the Delicate Arch again. If you see the Utah license plates, they have an image of Delicate Arch as the state symbol. It's the symbol of the park. This is Delicate Arch up here, but to get to it, we hiked up and we're on the rim of this bowl. And as I was taking pictures of Delicate Arch, the little one left. He ended up in the picture. How did he get there? Again, he ran down and around to get under the arch to get his picture there. It's about 67 feet tall. It's a pretty cool arch, but to get we were up on the ramparts over here, and he ran down and around the you could host a major outdoor concert here. The acoustics are amazing because it reverberates, and it's a big open amphitheater. But that's looking west. So to get this picture, you have to get beside, well, go up on the rocks to get it looking that way. But it gives you an idea what it takes to get up to Delicate Arch. And then at night, this is man-made lighting, but the stars, it's similar to Great Basin. It's out in the desert. There are no towns backlighting to wash out the stars, so it's just an explosion of night stars. Great place to camp. And then just below Moab, just south of there, is Canyonlands. Canyonlands, there's the town of Moab, so just north of there is Arches, and the road, you have to actually go up north and come down, because Island in the Sky is the triangular section. This is the Green and the Colorado River confluence here and divide the eastern section, which is the Needles, from the western section, the Maze. And the one in the middle is Island in the Sky. So there's three distinct sections to the park. Island in the Sky, you could drive up to this point. Grand views. This is not the Grand Canyon. This is very similar, but this is the view from sitting up at Dead Horse Point. You're 2,200 feet up above the water, so you can see to the horizon. Natural arch, same area, so you get the same kind of arches, not quite as densely populated as Arches National Park is. But this is this is a road. This is where Galen and Alicia actually drove down this road. Problem is you got to drive back up because there's no other way to get down there. It's a dirt bike trail actually. The bikers have a great time going down. Gravity is good while you're going down, but at some point you got to get back up. So but these are the views that you get sitting up on the ridge. And then when the two rivers come together, the volume is doubled, and now you have the rafting section, the stem section of the Y, if you will, where there's 14 miles of unrelenting whitewater. So it's great for day trips or whitewater rafting. The Maze District, I actually, last year in Washington, D.C. at a conference of park people, actually met the first person ever that I've known who has visited the Maze District. It's absolutely impenetrable. Why you would want to go there is the first question, but how you get there, there are very, very few guide services that know their way. It's named, very aptly named, the Maze, because the canyon's dead end and you have to go back out and find another way. There are not too many guides that know their way there, and there's not a lot to see when you're in there. They're all the same, so it's a very rarely visited section of the park. The Needles District on the eastern side is in fact accessible. You can drive up to here. I hiked over to Elephant Hill. This was in April, and you're getting up in elevation, so I've got long sleeves and long pants and gloves on. It actually was snowing while I was hiking out in there, but ancient petroglyphs on the rocks that you can come across. This is a particularly narrow place called Fat Man's Misery. Same, if you're camping out there, this is your reward for being off on your own. That's what you look out your tent, and that's what you see at night. Mesa Verde is it's at 9,000 feet, and this was a very chilly start to the day, so the kids aren't quite enthused yet. It's in the extreme southwest corner of Colorado. So from Canyonlands, we went down 191 and split off over towards Durango, and right in the corner is Mesa Verde. Mesa Verde, the town of Cortez is the entranceway. There's the visitors center there. That's at 6,000 feet, and then you're climbing up and up and up. And these series of fins, they did put one road up one of them to get to the
This is the only national park that preserves the works of man. All the other national parks are natural wonders. This is to preserve the cliff dwellings that were found there that were carved by the Anasazi Indians. But that's a geological panorama, which is why you can't go east to west. The road climbs up one of the fins, and you can look across at the others, but you can't really get there from here. 4,300 different archaeological sites have been found within the confines of the park itself, and they're still finding more as it gets explored. Teddy Roosevelt had this preserved when he got word that when they found the park, all of the Indian remains and pottery and everything were being stolen from the sites. So he quickly, it was either 1898, 1902, somewhere around there, gave it national park protection. Initially, this is up on top of the mesa top. That's where the structures were. Then all of a sudden, nobody knows why, but there's about a 400-foot section of sandstone, and they changed from being up on top to carving their dwellings a couple hundred feet down, a couple hundred feet up. Right in the middle of the 400-foot band, they put their dwellings. Nobody really knows why. And then after they were all done, about 100 years later, they disappeared. Literally, pots full of corn still sitting in the mesa. Dwellings, bows and arrows still sitting there. They literally just disappeared. They walked away, and it's a big mystery as to why. But as you drive up the road, this is the top of the mesa, so that's where the parking area is. And to get access to Balcony House, you have to go down, down, down a series of stairs there, and you come over, and this is the only way to get up. This is how they get up into the dwellings themselves. You have to climb up and then you're on one of those fins looking out across at the next mesa, and then there's one on the other side of it and stuff. But these are what they built for their homes. The biggest one, and it is impressive, 150 rooms. Again, there's the top, and then down here, they built a palace. It's right in the middle of you can hike down, there's stainless steel staircase to get down access to it. So there's ranger-led tours. You can go right into the ancient ceremonial kivas and stuff. Some are accessible, you can get in the rooms and stuff, but it just goes on and on. There's 150 rooms. This wasn't a little afternoon undertaking. They spent some serious time building this. I don't know why they walked away, but that's the layout of typical kiva, which is where they had their ceremonial. If you filled it in, see where the logs rest here to support the ceiling and stuff. That's the roof supports. So most of them, the logs have all rotted away over time and stuff, so they're just open. But if you fill one in, that's what they used to look like when they were initially constructed. And that's me with my boys going in to examine the adobe villages, the rooms. It's pretty unique. And as you drive up, there is a visitor center at the beginning. There's one fork where you can go up the west side of the thing. Cliff Palace is on the east side. Longhouse is very similar on the other side. This is the stairs going down from the area that you can drive to. You hike down, and you have the same access to the Longhouse as over on Cliff Palace. Just as grand an undertaking. And again, depending on the time of day, this is a late afternoon. The sun would pour in there and warm everything. So there's an afternoon view, and then sometimes they'll set up nighttime pictures and light the kivas and stuff. Pretty spectacular place, actually. down between Mesa Verde and getting down into Arizona, you gotta go through Four Corners area. So that's my son with a foot and a hand in each of 4 different states. Utah, New Mexico, Arizona, and what am I missing? Colorado. And to prepare them, they hadn't been to the North or Southwest before. I had shown them some of the old John Wayne movies that were filmed in Monument Valley, and when they were watching them, they assumed incorrectly that the background was fake, that they had just drawn on canvas, you know, these wild formations and stuff. But I showed them the mitten formations while we were watching the movies, and then this is from the visitor center at Monument Valley. I said, see, there's your mittens. They were real. I was jumping past, but Petrified, as you drop down from Four Corners, down 191, you get to Petrified Forest National Park. Probably the most accessible park in the entire system. It sits right on Route 40. We came down from Monument Valley. This is 191, and you're on the interstate. The interstate splits Petrified Forest. So you've got an interstate, you've got Route 180, you've got access. There's an exit right off the interstate. The northern section is the Painted Desert, and then the wood, the actual petrified wood, is down below in the southern district. And this is not unique. There are petrified logs in other places. There's some in Germany, there's some up in Minnesota, they're around the world, but this is one of the most concentrated areas. And basically what happened is the trees, when there was volcanic upheaval, it wiped out the trees like Mount St. Helens did, where they're all down like matchsticks, and they got all log jammed up. But then they were covered by the silt and the ash, covered over the wood. And what that did is slowed the decay of the wood because they were almost embalmed. They were covered. So the transfer of oxygen was slowed down, and eventually the water seeps down through the covering. The minerals that are carried in the individual droplets of water end up replacing the organic material. The water erodes the organic matter and replaces it with mineral. So this is what you end up with. This is solid rock, but at one point it was a tree. So it's pretty unique. This is a geology class. They're not looking for bugs. This is what they're looking at. If you get up close to it, it's amazing stuff. It's all solid rock, but it looks like a log. It looks like a tree. Unfortunately, theft is a big problem in Petrified Forest because everybody wants a souvenir. So what harm is this? So they stick a piece of it in their pocket. Well, the total, you're looking at 12 tons of wood a year. They have almost 1 million visitors a year to the park. So if everybody takes a little here and takes a little there, 12 tons a year of the petrified wood disappears. So that's a problem. Not so much for the big ones. There are some, the longest log is 120 feet long, one petrified log. This is a cabin that I don't know why you would want to live out here, but somebody did. They used adobe to patch together pieces of petrified wood. So the whole cabin is all petrified wood in the middle of mud. And they have their petroglyphs, their newspaper rocks and stuff from long, long ago. That's what a hike in Petrified Forest looks like. You just go out there, and in the northern section, the Painted Desert, it's pretty desolate. Depends on when you go there. If you go in the afternoon or evening, you can get, there are a lot of different colors depending on the minerals that are exposed. Sunset is gorgeous. This is one of the old parks, one of the inns in the parks. It was very tactfully built right stick his thumb out and say, here. No neon signs or anything, it's just very subtle. And Northern California is home to the Grand Canyon. This one, you know, of course you know of the Grand Canyon. Teddy visited here, and this is a guy that got around, and he deemed it the most impressive scenery he's ever seen in his life. An overview across ranges from 13 miles to, sections are only 4 miles across. The rim to the rim, all the way down to the bottom, the river can be as deep as 6,000 feet. And north to south, it's over almost 300 miles long. So it in fact is a very grand canyon. As you enter from the east, along the south rim, Mary Coulter built a structure, was commissioned to build a structure in the 30s called the Watchtower, which is pretty cool. She's got all kinds of Hopi Indian native decor. There's no end. The south rim snakes all along, and the scenic vistas, I would bore you silly if I stopped at each little turnout. Maybe 97% of the visitors to the Grand Canyon never step 1 inch below the rim. The road, and you don't have to. You see the spectacular views, but there's quite a, this is the rim of the canyon. There's a trail that goes all the way around the rim, and every different vantage point, Yaqui Point, South Kaibab, that gives you a little different perspective, so you can collect quite an array of photographs just by walking without even hiking down into the trail. Another one of the classic lodges of the parks is El Tovar, built right on the rim of the canyon, so the view from the rooms is spectacular. Again, they have shuttle buses that traverse back and forth the south rim, so you can't bring your personal cars there. On this trip in April, where I brought the boys, that was to be the grand finale, was the hike to the bottom of the Grand Canyon. Well, you can reserve, there's only a handful of campsites down at Bright Angel Campground. There's maybe 10 sites. So unless you're staying at the Phantom Ranch, where the mules come down to, if you're gonna hike down, you need a backcountry permit, and there's not a lot of sites. So, and unfortunately, you can reserve them up to 2 years in advance. So the availability is tough. I had been calling the office to get a reservation for 1 night for a campsite for maybe 9 months. And the same ranger answered the phone all the time. And he got to know my voice because oh, you again kind of thing. Any cancellations? So I was on the waiting list, and I knew the exact day that we were going to be there, and I just was trying, and it never worked out. We didn't get a site. We couldn't go down there, so all we could do was a day hike down, whatever we could get back up. We were resigned to that. 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we were having lunch in the parking lot, and across the parking lot is the backcountry office. So I left the group and went over there to the backcountry office. It was kind of funny because I walked in, and there's the counter, and the ranger's there talking to me, and then there's another old guy facing away from me, so his back was to me. And I asked, pulled a string on my back, any cancellations for tonight and stuff? The older guy, not the one I was talking to, the older guy wheeled around, he goes, you! he recognized from my voice the same routine that I'd been going through. And he starts cracking up laughing. He says, you are not gonna believe this. They had gotten a call like 15 minutes earlier of a couple that had broken down, their RV broke down in Flagstaff, and they weren't going to be able to take their permit for that night because we just had a cancellation. And this is 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's about a 6-hour hike to get down there. He goes,
it's there if you want it. He says, he says, I can't believe this. Because he knew I'd been calling and never couldn't get it. We ended up with a site, so we had to quickly bundle up and throw packs on and hike down, but we ended up, you have to step aside for the mules to go by if you go down Bright Angel Trail, but we ended up getting to hike down and camp at the bottom, just fortuitously, somebody smiled on us. It actually, geological terms, the canyon was carved rather quickly. The San Andreas opened up and allowed the Colorado to come through on its current course, and that's when it started carving the canyon. So it's only been, again, 5 million years, sounds like a long time, but in geological terms, it hasn't been at work all that long. And as you're hiking down, there's a couple of suspension bridges that get across. There's the bridge you go across, and Phantom Ranch is down there. This stream that we hike beside. And like I said, as opposed to Zion, where you have a little leeway on either side of the river, the Colorado is still carving away. So there's not a lot of places. This is the one place where they could put Phantom Ranch, where there's some land set aside. And this is the infamous Phantom Ranch. They have ranger, there's a campfire outside where they have ranger talks at night, and that was a memorable experience. I brought my younger son there to the ranger talk at night, and she was talking about the critters, the wildlife that are down at the bottom of the canyon, which are very, very different from up on the top. And she had black lights. Scorpions turn fluorescent green if lit by a black light. So she was showing us that. And then after the talk, she had little handheld black lights that she gave us, and we went off in the dark. Well, you want to find out how many of these little guys are around. You start shining your black light, and they're all over the place. There's scorpions around. So the warning that she gives to shake out your sleeping bag before crawling in at night, it's cold in the bottom of the canyon, and they'll crawl into your sleeping bag for warmth. And if you slide your bare feet in there, it's not a good thing. So that was an eye-opener to see how, because you can't see them. They're like under rocks and stuff, but when you shine the light under there they be. And this was the communal breakfast in the morning. That was kind of fun. Having thrown a few energy bars in our pack because we didn't really plan on meals and stuff. We had a last minute, quick, throw the tents on, let's get down there. We hadn't planned on a meal, and we finagled our way to join which normally you have to reserve in advance. They found room for us at the table. So here we're at the bottom of the Grand Canyon having all you can eat pancakes and orange juice and bacon, and it was awesome. We weren't exactly roughing it, but we had the boys go and dunk their heads in the Colorado to prove that in fact they were down at the bottom. And the rafting crews came by and stuff. And it was one thing going down quickly, to quite another when gravity's working against you and you're going back up. That's a long haul to get back up there. The same kind of switchbacks that just goes back and back and back. And you do get great vantage points, but boy, it's a long slog. Again, you have to make way for the mules. And it just seems never ending. You're putting one foot in front of the other. It's very dry. But we got up to the top, and you could see my youngest son, Galen, you could see him swell because it was clear with the sweated headbands and the packs that we were coming up with, that the visitors on top, clearly we had been to the bottom, and he was virtually signing autographs for the people at the top, and you could see his chest swell with pride. Yep, we were down there this morning. It was a great experience. Sunset views, no shortage of photo ops. If you do go out there, outside of the national parks, there's a few places. This is a new one, the skywalk that the Indians built.
the Havasupai, or Halapai Indians. Just opened relatively 11 years ago. It opened up. The vertical drop directly under the place that you walk on is 800 feet straight down, but down to the Colorado River, it's 3,600 feet. About $30 million to make sure it's not going to slip. This is when you walk out on it, you're out over the air, and the middle is glass. So it's completely clear, and you're looking straight down. That's what it looks like from the air. You're out just over a small section, but it's an 800-foot straight drop down. They have grand plans for casinos and hotels and stuff to build it up. It's on an Indian reservation, but it's a unique opportunity. Further down, outside the boundary of the park, is Havasupai Falls. This is the actual, that's not a filter, that's the color of the water from the minerals that the water picks up as it carves through and stuff. It's absolutely spectacular place. That you need an Indian guide, you need a permit to go on their reservation to get to that. And the last of our parks is down in southern Arizona, Saguaro. Grand Canyon, Petrified Forest, up on the northern part, go down to Tucson, and Saguaro is there. It's actually right outside the boundaries of the town. There's two sections, there's an east and a west section. Very, very accessible in terms of, you can walk from your hotel on the borders. There's trails that walk right up into the park, and it's a hell of a backdrop for the area. If you're getting married in the area and you want to readily identify where it was that you got married, saguaro don't grow anywhere else on earth, so it's oh, we know where you were. There are half a dozen actually parks that were specifically dedicated to the preservation of a particular species. Saguaro is one of them because they don't grow anywhere else. Again, if you go in April, in addition to the saguaro cactus themselves blooming, all of the different cactus, those are the buds on the saguaro itself. Big, big, bushy, white flowers. April is tolerable, between 50 and 80. That attracted me. 100 degrees, very different experience if you're going to go hiking out into it. But you're not far from civilization. It's part of the Sonoran Desert, which is the wettest of the four deserts. These are pretty special when you go out walking around them. It's one thing to take a picture of them, but they're 50 feet tall. So you stand beside one, and the arms don't even show up until they're 50 to 70 years old. So if you see the big ones like this, that can be hundreds of years old. And the only way that they can grow here is the network of roots goes out for literally acres. It's a very fine network, but they can, in the wet season, when the storm does, the once or twice a year that it does rain, they can store up to 200 gallons in one rainstorm, and they swell up. They're pleated, the folds in them, and it allows the swelling of the plant to expand when it does have the rare opportunity to suck up the water. The whole thing, 200 gallons of water weighs a lot. Up to 8 tons when they're hydrated. The Sonoran is, like I said, the wettest of the 4 U.S. deserts. Anybody want to volunteer what the names of the 4 U.S. deserts are? Oh, I'll give it to you. The Mojave is over at Death Valley, Joshua Tree, Mojave Desert. We've talked about the Great Basin Desert. We're in the Sonoran here, in the Saguaro, and the Chihuahuan Desert is mainly in Mexico, but it does bump into Big Bend National Park and up into New Mexico. But those are the 4 U.S. deserts. And it is yes, it's a foreboding landscape, but the critters are all over the place. They're very adapted. These are the guys that shine under the black lights, scorpions. Those are in the eastern section of the park. If you go over past the Sonoran Desert Museum, the west section is there, and this one, it looks like you had a landing from Mars. They're just all over the place. It looks like they just plunked down out of the sky. They populate the landscape, and it's eerie. Javelinas, the wild pigs are all over the place. There are bighorn sheep in the park. All kinds of reptiles, tortoises. They don't really care about being exposed during the day, so you can see them pretty much all over the place. Gila monsters you don't want to see. They have extremely powerful jaws, and their bite is poisonous, as are the rattlesnakes and stuff. So yes, it's a pretty area to hike in, but if you're going to go out and climb around on rocks like that, before you pull yourself up onto the nice sunny spot, you don't want to just put your hand up there, because that's where the rattlesnakes sun themselves. So you gotta be aware of where you are if you're going to hike out there. The pictures, it's just endless photo opportunities to take memorable pictures. Sunsets, the silhouettes of the saguaro are just easily burn yourself into your mind's eye to remember what it was like when you were camping out there and the evening came. There are a few other places, if you're going to go out to Arizona, that I would recommend if you're in that neck of the woods. Antelope Canyon is another one. It's on a Navajo reservation outside of Page, Arizona, so you have to hire a Navajo guide to be able to go in there. But this is our guide, and my son Gail, we went in there, and the pictures that you get here, it's a similar, very, very narrow, and when the water comes, it washes the sides, so they're just spectacular images. This is up in northern Arizona, a place called The Wave. That's me and my brother was turning 50, and he wanted to go to someplace special for his birthday. I said, I got a place in mind for you. This used to be the floor of an inland sea, and this is all solid sandstone. It's solid rock, and all of the striations have little texture bump out to them, so you can go. We climbed around for hours here. Never saw another person. Very, very unique place. That's the Wave down below. I climbed up to this arch that was up above it, but it's not on the way to anywhere. You have to, from Page, Arizona, you have to drive 60 miles up to Kanab, Utah, to the Bureau of Land Management. They administer to the Wave, and they don't really want anybody there. You can imagine what skateboarders would do to the Wave if it was accessible. So there are only 10 permits a day, 10 people a day allowed in there. If you go up to the Bureau of Land Management, you can put in for a permit, but if you have 4 in your group, then there's only 6 other people all day that can go there. So it's a unique opportunity. They give you a map. You have to drive down out in the middle of nowhere. They give you a mile marker where to turn off. There's not even a sign or anything. You just turn off at a mile marker, and there's a trail that leads off into the desert. If you, in fact, turned off at the right location, 5 miles out, there's a post in the ground that says North Coyote Buttes, and that's the parking area. You leave your car there, and then you take a line of sight set of directions to hike 7 more miles out. It says, look to the south, and there's a sandstone ridge, go up on top. Look to the west, there's 2 buttes, go to the north of them. hike like that for 7 miles out into the desert, and if you follow directions, you get to the wave. So it's not something that you're gonna stumble on, you gotta wanna be there. But to get to it, this is the lottery, because now so many people, given our internet exposure and social media, the pictures have gotten out there, now so many people wanna go to it, you have to go to the BLM, they post a ranger out there, so you can't go to this area without a permit. They're gonna monitor that only the expected number of people can go in there. So you have to go to the Bureau of Land Management office, and if there's more than 10 people there, you put your name in a hat, and they have a lottery every morning as to who can go there. So it's a hard place to get to, is the bottom line. Sedona, I'm sure some of you visited there. The Red Rock formations here are just imminently climbable. This was one of the vortex areas, the Bell Rock, that we climbed up on top of. Again, it's that cool, gritty sandstone that is very different. But that's the town of Sedona, and that's the backdrop to it. That's the whole area is like that. So it's very representative of the Red Rock area. Sunset on the west. So that's our visit. For the Southwest, I hope you like that. We're going to go from the hottest of hot to up into the glaciers of Alaska. So if you want to see the very different scenario, the grade 8, I call them, the 8 parts up in Alaska, have some pretty special pictures of their culminating in summit shots from the top of Mount McKinley that I spent 3 weeks climbing to